Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Dino. It's early here in mid-September, and this is going to be probably Karl and I's last motorcycle ride for the season, at least our long motorcycle trips, but you never know, we might sneak one in October. Over the next week, we're going to make our way up to Blind River, Ontario, and then ride all around the back roads up there for a number of days and then head back. Today, we're heading up to Port Elgin, Ontario again. We're going to stay at his son's house. And then the next day, well, we're going to head to Tobermory, get on the Chi-Cheemaun Ferry, and head over to Manitoulin Island. It should be a lot of fun, but over the next 2 days while we're traveling, well, it's supposed to rain and thunderstorm, so I need my liners for my riding pants, so I'm going to put them in before we go. Right now, I'm going to grab a coffee, then I'm going to head over to Karl's and pick him up, and we'll get on our way up to Port Elgin, Ontario. So why don't you sit back, grab yourself something cold to drink, and enjoy Dino's Tinker Shed. It's going to be a fun ride, I just know it. As Karl and I left Niagara Falls, the weather actually seemed like it would hold, and we decided not to put our rain gear on. This would prove to be a bad choice because I had every single vent in my coat open, the chest vent, the arm vents, everything. And all of a sudden the skies opened up and we were engulfed in rain and morons driving pickup trucks. It was absolutely crazy. We finally decided that we should probably pull over and sort of discuss what we were going to do, if we were going to put our rain gear on or whether or not we were just going to turn around. So once we stopped, we sort of got talking and we said, it's only 3 hours, a 3.5 hour ride up to Port Elgin, Ontario. Let's just go for it. And I was already starting to get water penetrating down my neck. My t-shirt was wet. I wasn't even going to bother putting rain gear on. Now, if you've ever had to try to merge onto a 4-lane highway, it's difficult. At rush hour like this, it's even harder. And in the rain, it really becomes difficult and you have to be cautious. The good thing about the DR is it's not overpowered, but it's fast enough to get up to speed and merge into traffic, and that's exactly what we did. And it wasn't long before we were back on our way for our ride through the rain for 3.5 hours. You can see here, there were times when the visibility was not very good, and you need to leave lots of room between you and the other people on the highway. Even when we got onto Highway 6, which is a 2-lane, sort of 4-lane road, it's 80 kilometers an hour, you still have to be cautious when you're riding in this type of weather, but it's good experience to learn how to handle your bike in these kind of conditions. We carried on until we finally found a place to eat here at Harley's Pub and Grill. Now this is an old building, I think it dates back to 1909, it's a lot of fun, and they had a great menu and reasonable prices, and one of the things we learned is there wasn't a lot of places open on the way up here, even though it was a Monday. So we had our bite to eat, and off we were gone on the road again. As we arrived in Port Elgin, the sun actually came out, and it became quite a nice day. So we followed our way through the back streets until we got to Karl's son's house. There we were able to park our bikes inside and use their clothes dryer to dry all of our riding gear before we went out, snuggled a little bit with Izzy, and then had a nice drink on the porch and talked about tomorrow. The next day, Karl and I loaded on the bikes and we met his son over at the local travel lodge for breakfast. This was a great breakfast, the omelet was awesome, and it gave us some time to both catch up with his son and talk about our trip. Once we were done, we loaded the bikes up and we headed north on Highway 21, which would eventually hook up with Highway 6 heading to Tobermory. We followed Highway 6 all the way up the Bruce Peninsula. This is a narrow strip of rock basically that heads north and terminates at Tobermory, and this is where we were going to catch the Chi-Cheemaun Ferry over to South Baymouth. I have to say the weather was unbelievable on the second day of our trip. We were really worried about rain, but the sun was out, partly cloudy, absolute beautiful blue skies, and you can see here just how wonderful it is to ride through these farm fields as we head north. The further north you do get on Highway 6, well, the landscape changes and eventually it does become rocky limestone outcroppings, which really lets you know that you're heading into northern Ontario, and you do get excited if you're from this area because you know you're breaking free basically. The small towns in and around Highway 6 as you make your way north are really fun too. There's lots of things to look at, lots of little communities, and I really do enjoy it. As we continued to travel, I could notice Karl sort of giving me some warning signs that he was having a little bit of bike issues. And this wasn't really a fun thing to hear about. As we pulled over in one of the small towns, he mentioned that his idle was running a little bit high, and you could hear it. I'm assuming it's probably around 2,500 RPM every time we would pull over. We kind of figured it was most likely a stuck choke plunger, and we decided that when we got to the ferry landing, we'd see if we could fix it or at least get it working for the remainder of the trip, maybe adjust the idle speed or something like that. So we carried on along our merry little way. After about an hour of riding, we arrived at the ferry landing, and we were the first motorcycles to arrive here. You can see the parking area is just about empty. There's really not a whole lot here to look at this point. But we found our spot, pulled over, and got off the bikes. Once we got our helmets off, we sort of turned our attention to Karl's high idle. It really seemed like his clutch plunger was stuck here, and without taking the tank and the bag and everything else off, we decided the easiest thing to do is adjust his idle screw and try and bring it down. In order to do this, I needed a couple tools, so I got to break into my new tool tube here. We adjusted the macro adjustment on the carburetor as well as the micro adjustment until we got it running right. This seemed to work, so we headed over and grabbed a bite to eat at lunch, and you could see that the parking lot started to fill up fairly quickly, and it wasn't long before the Chi-Cheemaun arrived from South Baymouth and unloaded the passengers that were southbound. The Chi-Cheemaun began its service in 1974, traveling between Tobermory in the south and South Baymouth on Manitoulin Island. The vessel is 364 feet long and about 62 feet wide, and it runs from mid-May to mid-October. It travels about 40 kilometers between those 2 points of call, and it takes the vessel about an hour and 3/4 depending on weather conditions to make the trip. It's a nice vessel and it's a fun ride. You should check it out. It wasn't long after the vessel unloaded that we were told it was our time to load. Now, like most ferries, motorcycles load first. They go on the boat first, and they're the first to unload as well. And guess who was the first person on the boat? Yours truly and Karl. As you enter the vessel from the bow, there's lots of staff that guide you to your parking spot. In my case, it was way at the very back or the stern of the boat. Make sure to pay attention to where the people guide you to. They've done this hundreds and hundreds of times. Motorcycles are parked over top of ground anchors that are in the floor. So you park your bike, and then, unlike some ferries, the Chi-Cheemaun uses bits of rope to tie your bike down, and you're responsible for doing this. The boat staff don't do this. So you should know how to tie a decent knot that you can get undone. In my case, I just used a basic taut line hitch, and with the help of Karl, we just compressed the bike suspension, tightened the rope up, and then I locked the hitch down. While you're doing this, pay attention because staff are also loading other vehicles in behind you, such as cars and even transport trucks. So once we got Karl's bike tied down, we headed up on the deck. Once you get up on the decks, the view from the Chi-Cheemaun is fantastic. The boat is quite big. It feels pretty large when you walk along its rails here and look out. But you get to really see a great view of both the lake and all the islands as you travel along. It really is a lot of fun. I made my way up onto second and third decks that they have on this boat. You can sit in Muskoka chairs all the way across if you want, or you can go inside. They've got amenities in there as well. But I really enjoyed being outside and walking along the rails here. It really was pretty impressive. And the one thing that I really wanted to see was how the bow closes up when they're fully loaded, and it was different than what I expected. So here you can see the bow in its fully raised position, and they've pretty much finished loading the boat. Now I thought they would lower this before they actually started moving the boat, and I was wrong about this. What they actually do is they back the boat out as the bow's coming down. So I'm not sure in really rough water how this would work, but I guess it does. It takes about 5 minutes for the bow to fully close, and you can see once it gets close, the captain starts basically a J-turn in the middle of the canal and spins the boat around using an 8,000 horsepower or 800 horsepower bow thruster. I can't remember which it is. I think it was 8,000 horsepower. And they spin that boat around just like you're parking a Prius. It was pretty impressive. Once we were underway, Karl and I went and checked out the inside of the boat a little bit. They have cafeterias and lounges and washrooms and all the good things you would expect on a boat. And it is a great place to get out of the wind because this boat really is windy when you get out on the lakes. And that's really where I wanted to be, was outside in the weather as much as possible. The trip itself, like I said, takes about an hour and 3/4. And as you stand on the front of the boat here and you get past this lighthouse, all of a sudden the wind picks up. I bet it's 30 or 40 miles an hour anyway. It really is quite impressive. Now the hour and 3/4 went by fast, and it wasn't long before they called us to return to our vehicles. Just like when we launched, they open up the stern of the boat before we actually get into port, and you can see sort of the landing area here over to the right in front of this truck. Once they get in there, they actually latch the back of the boat to the landing area. It was really neat. And then they basically lower a ramp down into the boat itself to get a hold of everybody. Now, as you can see, they even take transport trucks on the Chi-Cheemaun. This is a pretty big boat to be riding on. And it was kind of neat to be able to sit right as front and center as I could here to the actual unloading process. I was able to see the ramp come down and land onto the boat. And once the guy on shore here, this random dude, was able to come on, I was the first one to leave the boat, which was really, really, really fun. So on comes guy who I don't know what he is. He must be a ship dude here. And then it was time to get moving. And I don't know if these people watch Dino's Tinker Shed, but I got an applause here. It was pretty fun. Once we cleared out of town and got on the road, we pulled over on one of the many scenic lookouts on Manitoulin Island to get our rain gear on. We were pretty confident we were going to see a few showers on the way, so we didn't want to take any more chances. We continued heading north on Highway 6, which actually continues on Manitoulin Island. It's really weird. But it leads you about 40 to 45 kilometers north into Little Current, Ontario. Now, Little Current, Ontario is the crossing point to get off of the island and back onto the mainland. And it does this in kind of a neat way. It actually crosses a swing bridge, so this bridge actually turns and allows ships to travel through the Goat Island channel here. Now, it's a very narrow bridge. It only holds one vehicle lane at a time, and so cars have to stage on either the north or south side before they're allowed across. It's a really cool feature, and these are the kinds of things that I just love to see when I'm riding. It's a pretty little bridge, it's fun to cross, and it continues leading you north afterwards, all the way up past Espanola, heading towards Highway 17, which is the Trans-Canada, which is what we're actually trying to head to. So we just carry on our merry little way for about another 45 minutes. It wasn't long before we made the left-hand turn onto Highway 17 heading west. And once again, there's morons in pickup trucks that want to pass us. Highway 17's busy, it's a 90-kilometer-an-hour road, but it wasn't really all that long before we saw Lake Luzone, and I knew we were close to Blind River. We rolled into town around 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and this is one of the weird things about small Ontario towns is their hours of operation are kind of limited. The grocery store here actually closed at 5:30, so our idea of picking up dinner and cooking it at the camp quickly went out the window. Instead, we just decided to drive to the cabin, sort of unload the bikes, and then figure out what we were going to do to eat. The trip to my family's cabin is about a, 25-minute, maybe 30-minute ride from Blind River itself, and it takes you through some really pretty back roads here. The fall color's just starting in September, and as you meander your way through, you can see all kinds of wildlife. This time of the year, you can even see sandhill cranes as they're migrating. As we got closer, we ended up back onto private roads that lead to our camp, and as we passed, we decided to stop in and see my friend Kevin, who we've known for 30 years, and see what he's up to and if he wanted to go out and have a little bite to eat with us that night. He's a really, really solid guy. I think everybody here would really like him. Oh, man.
Huh. No, I just got home. I had to go see one of the Americans. He's taking off for Florida tomorrow.
Was that right?
The other ones took off. They dropped their van off from California. They're gone.
They're still calling you.
Oh, no, that's not Tommy. It's Tommy, somebody's here.
After a great visit with Kevin, we traveled a little ways further down the road to my family's camp. We parked and unloaded the bikes, took a little break, and waited for Kevin when we went out and got a nice bite to eat at a local restaurant. And as we ordered our dinner, the waitress told us that this was actually talent night. All the locals brought their own instruments and they played. It was like being out on the East Coast. It was amazing. Now I'm going to end the video here for this part 1. It's been a really great ride. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you soon here on Dino's Tinker Shed. For now, I'm going to leave you with a bit of lakefront view. I hope you enjoy it. Bye for now.